Earlier today, it was reported that the President's Deputy National Security Advisor was asked about my call that the President and the administration speak clearly about the nature of the enemy we face, about my call that we would be honest with the American people and with ourselves about the fact that we are at war with militant Islam. We are at war with jihadi Islam. We are at war with violent Islam. In response, the White House was quoted in the World Herald this morning as saying this: "Our strong belief is not to treat these ISIL terrorists as leaders of some religious movement. Even if you have a derogatory adjective attached to it, radical Islam or Islamic extremism," the White House continued, "essentially you are saying that these are leaders of a religious movement, and that is what they want. They want to be seen not as terrorists or killers or thugs, as the President has said, but as leaders who speak on behalf of a religion. And that is why we have not identified that as the enemy in this effort," the White House said. Mr. President, this is lunacy. First, while the White House is insisting that no one use the word Islamic or note any connection between the war that we're facing and some subset of Islam, even as the White House insists that no one use the word, their own preferred adjective, ISIL or ISIS, begins with an I. Every fourth grader in America can deduce, without any assistance from Vanna White, what the rest of the word that begins with an I is. And yet the White House insists that no one should use the word. Mr. President, they are dealing with a world that they wish were so, as opposed to the world with which we're called to struggle. The world in which we live is a world where we are going to be facing a decades-long battle with militant Islam, with jihadi Islam, with violent Islam. We are obviously not at war with all Muslims, but we are at war with those who believe that they would kill in the name of religion, and the White House insists that we muzzle ourselves and not tell the truth. Second, the White House's logic for why we shouldn't tell the truth to the American people or to ourselves is because the leaders of ISIL supposedly want to be identified with a religious movement. Mr. President, the leaders of the ISIL movement and the broader jihadi movement that is trying to kill Americans and all those who believe in freedom and an open society, the leaders of this movement also want to be martyred. Is it the President's position that we should not kill them because they desire to be martyred? Mr. President, this is lunacy. We have to speak the truth, not because it alone will somehow diminish ISIS or ISIL, but because speaking the truth is actually the only way that we could begin to develop policies that will not lead to more failed states in the Middle East, which are producing the terror training camps of next year. Despite the fact that we are actually and obviously at war with militant Islam, there is a terrible leadership vacuum in this country. The American people know this, and frankly, those of us who are getting our classified briefings and having to engage the leadership of our national security and intelligence communities know that this leadership vacuum exists, and those that are trying to keep Americans safe, there are many wonderful, freedom-loving civil servants fighting to protect our kids. They know and experience this vacuum of leadership every day. This vacuum is felt outside the Beltway, everywhere in America, as is obvious in many of our towns. But even more dishearteningly and more dangerously, it is increasingly obvious to the professionals working in our intelligence community and our national security structure that this vacuum is harming our national security and our intelligence community as they try to fight for our freedom. Here's why this matters. This vacuum prevents them from doing their jobs. They have no strategy to deploy, they have no rational policy to implement, and they have been asked to defeat an enemy that their commander-in-chief refuses even to name. This is lunacy, it is absurd, and it is unacceptable. Mr. President, please lead.